Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 24. By the time you hear this, I'll be on a plane flying to Los Angeles to do interviews with Johnny Harvey for his Ghost Empire documentary about Harvey Comics. I will let you know in a future podcast what happened and when this exciting documentary is due to come out. Our guest today has been the curator for many, many years at the Cartoon Art Museum in San Francisco, and is also the author of books about Looney Tunes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Peanuts, 80s cartoons, and Harley Quinn, among others. Here he is, Andrew Farago. So, hey Andrew, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Just wanted to know tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Cartoon Art Museum.
Okay, yeah. Lifelong fan of cartoons, comics, and the animation. And when I moved out to San Francisco in 2000, I was looking for, something fun to do with my weekends. And, I was looking, there were probably about 3 websites at the time, but one of them was Craigslist, so I looked up local volunteer opportunities there and found a listing for the Cartoon Art Museum. That was summer of 2000, and, I've been here ever since.
Now, you're considered, what's your official title now, the curator, or do you have another title than that?
I'm the curator. So I started out as a volunteer. When I was hired on staff, it was as the gallery manager. And then when our own curator at the time moved on to a position at Ohio State University, it was easy enough for me to just move across the hall and take her office. So, that's been almost closing in on 15 years, I'd say.
Wow.
As the head chief only curator at the museum.
Now, you said you started in 2000 as a volunteer. How many years had the museum been in existence prior to that?
Okay, the museum started in 1984.
Okay.
So a man named Malcolm White, who is a publisher and writer and collector and appreciator of the arts. He was inspired in part by Mort Walker's International Museum of Cartoon Art, which is on the East Coast. And Malcolm and some of his friends said, well, we need one right here in California, especially San Francisco, which many historians will tell you is the birthplace of the comic strip, and it's where underground comics took off. You actually have the roots of television animation right here with cartoons like Crusader Rabbit. So, he said, why not San Francisco?
Wow.
That was almost 35 years ago, and still here.
Now the location's moved a few times. I honestly don't know where it is right at the moment, so you might want to promote that. But how many locations has it been over the years?
It's funny. We have, it's one of those oxymorons, like new permanent location. But the museum, for most of its existence, was in the South of Market neighborhood in San Francisco. So until just a couple years ago, we were on Mission Street in the again south of Market, Yerba Buena Arts District, and every time we've moved, and I'll mention that our first permanent location was founded in 1987, and that was thanks to an endowment from Charles Schultz and his wife Jeannie.
Oh wow!
So that was the first permanent location back in 1987, and then over the years combination of, the ever-changing real estate market has had us move a number of times. So sometimes it's an opportunity to get a bigger and better space. Sometimes it's sometimes it's required because the rents have gone up. So we've moved a number of times. Most recently, though, we've moved, and we passed our 1-year anniversary pretty recently. But we are at 781 Beach Street in San Francisco, about a half block away from Ghirardelli Square. So it's a really, big change for us. It's a nice, very scenic location. Not far at all from Fisherman's Wharf. We're actually considered part of the Fisherman's Wharf community district. So yeah, it's a really exciting new neighborhood for us.
So how many square feet is it now, or if you don't know that off the top of your head, is it the largest museum space that you've had?
I'll say that it's very comparable to our previous location. So if you visited us from 2001 to 2015, we have a comparable space here at 781 Beach Street, and people can go to our website if you Google Cartoon Art Museum or look up cartoonart.org, and we do all the major social media networks too.
Very cool.
To keep people up to date on who we are and what we're doing.
So as curator, I mean, I know what a curator does, but I mean, tell us what you do as a curator.
Okay, yeah, it's it's since we are a small museum and a small staff, we all do a little bit of everything. So I don't know if I could ever go to work for a larger museum because I would just have such a different responsibility set. Probably a much diminished responsibility set at another museum. Because what I do is I work with our other staff members and our board of directors to plan out full roster of exhibitions. We also we work with other institutions, either borrowing and lending with other institutions. When I put together an exhibition that involves a combination of things. So often I will work with artists directly if they're still with us and if they still have a substantial body of their own artwork. But I also work with collectors and institutions. So if someone approaches me with an idea, someone says, I want to do a show about cartoon dogs, then I'll discuss it with them. Are you a cartoonist? Have you done a strip that's about cartoon dogs? Are you a collector? Do you have this? Do you have access to the artists and the material that you would want to put in this exhibition? So I have to ask all the practical questions to make sure this is something that we can pull together in a reasonable time frame and do well. And I also have to do a lot of research. I write the exhibition text. I will talk to artists and collectors and historians and come up with programming that we can do over the course of the exhibition. So we have things that we have public presentations. We have to come up with the educational component of it so that we know, how to engage with teachers and school groups that will visit during the course of an exhibition. And all of us on staff have about 1 million little jobs that would each be handled by entire departments at a larger museum.
very cool. Well, apart from the Harvey Art show that we worked on, what was your favorite? What was your favorite exhibition you've had over the years that you were in charge of?
I've worked on well over 100 exhibitions at this point, and there are, so many fun ones that we've done. I did a Superman 75th anniversary show that was really special to me because one of the first, I'd say actually the first time I saw comics in any kind of museum setting was Superman's 50th anniversary. Which
where was that?
My class field trip in sixth grade coincided with Superman's 50th anniversary, and the Smithsonian in Washington D.C. had a Superman 50th anniversary exhibition, and that obviously planted a seed because 25 years later I got to assemble a Superman 75th anniversary exhibition. And over the years, I've worked on, Peanuts exhibitions and Calvin and Hobbes and Mad Magazine, and you assisted with that one. That was a lot of fun. That was one of the, I don't know if it was the first. It may have been the first exhibition of Mad that spanned from the comic book era all the way to the then right up to the minute latest material from the magazine. So that was incredible. Another personal favorite would have to be the Mary Blair exhibition. Which she was a brilliant concept artist for Disney. Talented children's book illustrator, created a lot of very iconic 1950s advertising art, and I wouldn't say she was forgotten when we did our exhibition, but she was still in the underappreciated category.
Yeah.
And the exhibition that we did, it spun out of discussions we'd had with other people, historians and fans of her work, and we drew inspiration from Disney historian John Canemaker. He wrote a really great book about Mary and her work. So my wife and I helped pull together this exhibition for the Cartoon Art Museum. We worked with Mary's son, and we worked with animators and collectors who had some of the best examples of her artwork, and that's a show that really took on a life of its own because we ended up we gave guided tours of that exhibition to Walt Disney's daughter, Diane, who's since passed away, but also to a lot of the top people from Pixar who told their friends at Studio Ghibli to check this exhibition out. So we actually gave a tour to this delegation from Studio Ghibli, and they decided to do a greatly expanded version of it at the Contemporary Art Museum in Tokyo a couple of years later. So all this one little idea ended up getting me a couple of trips to Japan where we worked on this phenomenal international exhibition of her work. And I don't always expect that to happen when I sit down and hash things out with a collector or an artist, but you just never know where these things are going to lead.
Do you think that was the most lucrative one or the most successful one, or were there others?
Let's see. As far as blockbuster attendance, the Calvin and Hobbes exhibition that we did right when we moved into our previous space, again back in 2001, that was in the most people.
Hmm.
And one of our all-time busiest months was we had a very limited run of an exhibition featuring the movie Coraline.
Oh yeah.
So that was a case of Leica Studios calling up, letting us know, we've got this great artwork, we've got concept artwork, we have puppets and models and all this behind the scenes look at stop motion animation, sets, all this cool stuff, and we don't have any place to put it. So we jumped at that, and because I had a few things that were locked into the calendar, at that time we could only do a 1-month limited engagement.
Uh-huh.
And between Leica putting the word out and probably a few well-placed notes from Neil Gaiman on social media, we had a really busy month with that exhibition.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've had a few commercial hits as well as the critical favorites.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the Mary Blair one. Did the same exhibition go to Japan, or was it just a different one, or how did that work?
Well, that was interesting. So the space that we had available for the exhibition when we hosted it was, we were able to put together, a nice, probably 60-piece retrospective of her work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's concept art and photographs and animation paintings and little artwork from little golden books. So a lot, and some of her personal paintings.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reason I asked that is I guess the real question is how often do these travel? I know, like the Harvey one we did traveled to other museums, so it sounded like the Mary Blair one did too. I don't know, did the Coraline one do it if you had for a month, or did that just appear there and that was it?
Yeah, most of the majority of our shows end up being these one-off shows. So I put it together. We have it on display for a limited time, and then the artwork goes back to its point of origin. If it's a show that we borrowed the materials from other people,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, if that's the case, then often it means that a collector has had his artwork out on the road for 6 months or more. So they're usually happy to get it back after it's been traveling for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends. If we generally let it be known when we put together an exhibition. Yes, we can work with you and your institution, and we can find a way to bring this to your venue if you're interested in it. Sometimes I'll get tapped to assist with the show, and that's kind of what happened with Mary Blair. If they don't take the show from us directly, but they know I've worked on it, I may get tapped to work on a version of it for their venue. So the Mary Blair show, for example. So there's the Contemporary Museum in Tokyo had an exhibition of Disney art. During Walt Disney's lifetime, in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting story. Some of this artwork, at the end of the exhibition, for whatever reason, it got put away, and everybody forgot about it. Nobody remembered that this artwork had been loaned out. It makes me feel better about if I'm a week behind on my paperwork or something, knowing that this artwork disappeared for 50 years. So they found this artwork. let them know. And Disney said, as a goodwill gesture, why don't you keep it? So they, in Japan, they put it on display. So they did a Disney exhibition, and it was very popular. And then they said, we noticed that the most popular, and obviously the artist that resonated with the audiences the most, was Mary Blair. So her artwork was, very appealing to Japanese audiences, and that planted the seed for them to do a Mary Blair solo exhibition. And since they were aware of our work here in the U.S., they contacted us, asked for our help in contacting artists and pulling artwork together, helping them assemble by far the largest Mary Blair exhibition ever assembled. So they borrowed everything from the Blair family that was available. They borrowed as much as they could from the Disney archive, the official Walt Disney archives. They borrowed from private collectors, so several of whom I put them in contact with. And they took our little 60-piece show and they spun it off into a I don't know, it may have been a 500-piece show.
Wow.
Altogether. So we took one really large gallery room at the museum, and they took about 2 floors of their giant contemporary art museum. So they were able to do and they also had whereas our staff was me and my wife, they had a full crew working year round leading up to the show, putting it together. And interestingly, they told us at the end of that show that they wrote down a very high number on a piece of paper, and they explained to us that was the attendance for the Disney, the Walt Disney Studios show that they'd done 3 years earlier. And then they mentioned when the Mary Blair show opened, it opened quietly. They were nervous about it because they were working with a museum and Studio Ghibli and NHK, which is a major television studio. And they said it opened very slowly, that the first couple months they were worried that they were going to maybe even lose money on this exhibition. But then they wrote down this number that was much bigger than the Walt Disney number. and they said this was what the attendance was for the Mary Blair show. They said positive word of mouth allowed the show to really catch on. They extended the show because it was so popular and because they had wall-to-wall people checking it out every day. And they said the vast majority of the audience was women. So this was all really, very, very interesting to me, and it was cool that, I don't think they didn't even use the name Disney in advertising her exhibition. So if you just saw the name Mary Blair and a picture, that's all that's out there. So there's no picture of Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck to bring you in. And that was such a fun, exciting experience.
Well, yeah, she did have a very appealing art style. I know she did some children's books, and of course, if anybody's seen Small World at Disneyland or Disney World or wherever, that's her stuff.
Right. I should have mentioned. Yeah, I should have mentioned that right off. That's where you know her work is if you've ever been, if you've ever ridden It's a Small World, if you've seen the children's book I Can Fly. But the whole 1950s, happy smiling kid aesthetic and bright colorful shapes, all that can be, a lot of that, especially in modern animation, can be traced to her work.
Now, you're saying that there is some rare pieces in that. What show or what piece over the years has been like either the rarest or like the biggest coup, I guess, to get to display in the Cartoon Art Museum?
That's a very good question. Every once in a while, and I don't know that I've borrowed too many of them, but every once in a while I'll see a piece of art that is just I've seen so many times that it's almost impossible to comprehend it as being a real piece of art. And it'll be a comic strip that I've seen 1,000 times, or a comic book cover. And I think, actually, the very first exhibition I saw when I visited the Cartoon Art Museum as again in my volunteer days, it was for a Peanuts 50th anniversary exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been not long after Charles Schulz had passed away. And there's a great early 50s Peanuts Sunday strip where Charlie Brown visits his local newsstand and is impressed by all the amazing comic books that are on the rack.
Oh yeah.
And he says, what a beautiful gory layout.
Right.
And all the comics have names like Maim and Stab and Gouge and Kill and things like that. So, Schulz, I don't think, had a very high opinion of comic book art necessarily. And certainly in the 1950s, that impression of comics as being these horrible, violent magazines, that impression was not, wasn't without merit. But that was some of my earliest exposure to original cartoon art, and that was a great way to kick it off. And again, seeing these pieces that I've grown up with in person.
Yeah. That particular strip. Sorry, that particular strip, was that in a private collector's hands, or was that from the Schulz Museum or Jeannie Schulz?
That was in the hands of a private collector.
Okay.
So a lot of our friends at the Charles Schulz Museum and Research Center in Santa Rosa have the world's largest repository of Peanuts original artwork. And so they've got a great collection. Schulz was very generous as far as giving strips to friends and fans and trading with other artists. So a lot of it did leave his possession over the years, and then a lot of that, I'd say in the 80s and 90s, before people, before the original art market really took off to the heights that it's reached today. It was possible to still get a good deal on original Peanuts artwork.
Yeah.
So now that ship has long since sailed, but some major collectors who are now very prominent art dealers, a lot of them were ahead of the curve and were buying Peanuts original art when it was still relatively affordable.
Yep. Now, I notice you do certain shows, like you've done the Silicon Valley show, you do San Diego Comic Con, or I guess Comic Con International. Do you put on art shows there for a Cartoon Art Museum, or is it just an excuse to be on panels and raise money for the museum, or both?
It's a combination of things. So some shows, some conventions, they do have that as part of the reason that we will be there is they may have a gallery space, and they may ask us to put together an exhibition. I've been to a few international festivals where it's basically singing for your supper, where they have a particular theme that they're exploring, and so they'll ask, hey, can you put together an exhibition on? So I did a Batman show once for a Greek festival, and I got to let's see, I got to go to Portugal by putting together a Superman exhibition for them, and I've actually worked with this great Greek festival called Comicdom, which is I love it. You can fit the entire Greek comic book industry into a small room. You could get them all. You could get them all at McDonald's together if you wanted, and so that's. But they're very tight knit. It's a very fun group, and I'm actually working on a small Archie exhibition for them right now. I probably won't get to make the trip, but we enjoy working with them, and it's easier for me to put together artwork here in the U.S. and send it to them than for them to contact all these separate collectors that they haven't worked with before. So I do some work like that, but a lot of what I do at conventions ends up being a combination of programming, which is organizing and moderating panel discussions about cartoon art and comics history, and also, we frequently end up staffing convention tables there, so we get a chance to sell some merchandise, but even more importantly than that is a chance to talk to comic fans and let them know who we are, what we do, encourage them to visit next time that they're in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
So just public outreach and really spreading the word so that everybody knows who we are and what we do.
Do you do shows elsewhere? I mentioned the two that I know about, but do you ever do any like in East Coast or elsewhere in the country or even the world, as far as?
So a lot of those, it depends on our individual travel plans. So me and my coworkers, if we are, I haven't tabled at New York Comic Con, but my only visit there actually was about 10 years ago, and that was to give the Cartoon Art Museum's Lifetime Achievement Award to Mort Walker. Because so this is interesting. Our Lifetime Achievement Award is called the Sparky Award, and it's named after Charles Schulz. That was his childhood, and actually through his whole life, that was his nickname, Sparky. And this is based on the horse Sparkplug from the Barney Google comic strip. So our Lifetime Achievement Award is it's a Snoopy statue. Snoopy is holding an ink pen, standing by an inkwell. It's called the Sparky Award, and we give it out for lifetime achievement in comics. And Jeannie Schultz asked, and when she asks, you listen. But she asked if we would consider giving one to Mort Walker for his years of his years in the comic strip business and serving as a mentor to young cartoonists, running a successful studio, all the work he'd done with the military, and his own charitable efforts over time. So we said, yeah, absolutely, we would love to flew. This is the only. I spent one afternoon at the New York Comic Con, so I flew in with a 30-pound Snoopy statuette in my carry-on bag. I don't know. 10 years ago you could do it. I don't even know if today they would let me do it. But it was funny. Like it was all wrapped up and went through the X-ray scanner, and they said, "Here's your Snoopy statue," which was modern technology. So I had the opportunity to present this award to Mort Walker. Thanked him. Had a really incredible career retrospective panel discussion with him, and then I was back on the plane back to San Francisco. But I'd love to go spend more time at that show. Mm-hmm. For practical reasons, mostly what we do are California conventions, but occasionally we've done. If we know that I'll be there or one of my coworkers will be there, we've done shows in Portland and Seattle, up and down the West Coast. But if someone will pay my way, if they'll get me out there to do a full slate of programming, then I will be happy to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, apart from the Charles Schulz Museum in Santa Rosa, is the Cartoon Art Museum really the last of its kind nowadays? Because, I think Mort Walker's museum is closed, and I think the Toonseum is closed, and I think the MoCA is closed, and I think Jeppy's museum is closed. Are there any other cartoon art museums in the country?
There have been some that have come and gone. But let me do the rapid fire history. I mentioned Mort Walker and his museum and how that was actually an inspiration to Malcolm White and his friends who founded the Cartoon Art Museum. And it's the same story over and over again about it is an underappreciated art form. It's difficult to convince. It's difficult to convince people of the merits of it. Not because of the once they learn it, and that's what we do. We educate people about it. But arts funding, education funding, this is all very competitive. And there are a lot of organizations competing for not very much funding, so that makes it difficult. And there is some still, unfortunately, some prejudice against the word cartoon. And when we are competing for other organizations with grants, that's an ongoing issue. The Mort Walker's museum had a good long run, about 25 years, before they ran into funding issues. So they closed their doors, I think, around 2000, 2001. But their collection all made it over to Ohio State University.
Oh, okay.
And what started as the Milton Caniff library has grown to they've actually got the world's largest collection of cartoon art and newspaper clippings and books and everything else. So they're now called the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum. So that's around. So we've got them. The Toonseum in Pittsburgh, again, also ran into funding issues, as did MoCA in New York. We and MoCA and the Cartoon Art Museum have similar issues of being, trying to make a go of it, and two of the places with the most expensive real estate on Earth, which I could tell you it's a constant battle,
Right.
keeping up with that, and MoCA folded into they basically dissolved, and their collection was absorbed by the Society of Illustrators in New York. So a lot of things come and go, things change and evolve, and but one of the exciting things for me is it feels like not a week goes by that I don't hear about an exhibition of cartoon art or comic art or animation artwork that's being planned somewhere. So I just saw Britain has a major manga exhibition coming up, and the the Academy of Motion Pictures, the Motion Picture Academy, MPAA, they're launching a museum with a Studio Ghibli exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think appreciation for the cartoons and comics as an art form has grown exponentially, even during the 20 years or so that I've been involved with this field, and it's exciting. There are always going to be struggles with individual museums and galleries and institutions, but I think love and appreciation for cartoons as an art form has just been onward and upward this whole time.
Mm-hmm. What shows do we have to look forward to in 2019 then at Cartoon Art Museum?
I've got a number of things in the works. So right now, we have an exhibition featuring an artist named Joe Mora, Jomora,
Mm-hmm.
and he was called the Renaissance Man of the West. Very talented artist, born in Uruguay, came to the U.S. with his family when he was a child in the 1800s, and he did a lot of incredible Western-themed art. So drew cartoon maps of California. He drew children's books. He drew comic strips. Talented painter, sculptor. He's still got. You can see a lot of his statues all throughout the Bay Area, as well as Monterey, that area of California, and an incredibly talented artist. We're thrilled to be bringing his work back to the public. A lot of the work that we're showing, even though it was done prior to his death in 1946, a lot of what we're showing right now is on public display for the first time ever.
Wow.
So I like doing stuff like that. We recently wrapped up an exhibition featuring Jim Starlin, who's best known for cosmic Marvel comic books. A lot of the stuff that's informed the recent Avengers movies came from his work, and so it's fun that we get to go back and forth from here's something that the man on the street's gonna know and is featuring famous characters and properties and artists, and then we get a chance to shine a spotlight on someone who either never got their due or has been out of the spotlight for some time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the Joe Mora exhibition, we've got an ongoing exhibition featuring highlights from our animation permanent collection. So that's again a lot of work that's been in our vault for years, maybe even that maybe has never been on public display. And yeah, I love the opportunity to share that with the public.
And I know you've written a number of books. We can talk about a couple of them at least. But did you get your book contracts, I guess, for lack of a better term, by being the curator of the Cartoon Art Museum, or did you just approach publishers independently?
Well, yeah, I will say that I'm one of the there aren't a lot of people who have have the word cartoon in their job title officially. So that does that does help me to stand out when you are looking over a group of applicants for a position.
Mm-hmm.
So my writing work, I would say I trace this back mostly to one of the museum's first board members. He may have actually even been a founding board member. He put me in touch with a publisher because they were working on this is a long time ago now. The San Rafael-based publisher Insight Editions does really nice coffee table books. They do a lot of art-driven books, artifact-driven books, and they were working on a book called The Hanna-Barbera Treasury, which was written by our friend Jerry Beck.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for some additional art and artifacts to help round out that book. So this board member, this early Cartoon Art Museum board member, put them in touch with me and said, "Hey, you got to talk to Andrew at the Cartoon Art Museum because he can probably." And that's one of the things we do at the museum. If a publisher puts in a request and we're able to accommodate that, we're the custodians of this artwork. We're not the owners of it. We're not the copyright holders. So if we can help with a historical project, we're happy to do that. So I met with one of the editors and helped them find some art for this Hanna-Barbera book. And I don't know how much later it was, but Jerry Beck was working on a book about the 100 greatest Looney Tunes.
Right.
And he needed people to write. He was looking for 50 animation authorities to write 2 essays apiece on these 100 great Looney Tunes cartoons. So I got tapped for that, and the editor on that book liked my work enough that he called me up, a year or so later, to ask me to write a book called The Looney Tunes Treasury, which is now about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably more than 10 years ago that I started the project. But he said basically they had the license to do a Looney Tunes book, and they wanted to do a history book, but because again, I keep mentioning Jerry Beck because so many people had written authoritative, in-depth history books about the Looney Tunes. they wanted a different approach to it. So this was a creative writing project as well. They needed they wanted to look at the Looney Tunes. They wanted to tell the stories, the histories of these characters, but as told by the characters. So I had to write Bugs Bunny's history in Bugs Bunny's voice as told by Bugs Bunny. So I did that for the most popular characters. I managed to work in some Easter eggs and looks and winks at some of the lesser known characters. And it was that was a very fun book, and that got my foot in the door. Although it took a few years. It was probably it was actually another few years before I got a call from the same publisher. For the most part, I don't actively look for writing projects. Mm-hmm. I just kind of take them on as they come my way, and that keeps me busy enough.
Yeah.
But a few years later, the same publisher asked if I would be interested in writing about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I said sure. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a history book on that, and a few years later, I worked on this is kind of an outgrowth of the Ninja Turtles book, but the same. My editor for that project, do you want to write about 1980s cartoons? So do a chapter on the Ninja Turtles 80s cartoon, but do cover 15 other of your favorite cartoons from that decade. Mm-hmm. So I said absolutely, that sounds great. And while I was working on that, because that was such a long project, and it took longer than we realized to sort out all the rights and permissions involved. So while I was waiting for that one to come out, they said, well, why don't you work on a Harley Quinn 25th anniversary book while we're waiting on that? So I said, sure. And while I was working on that, another publisher contacted me and said, would you like to write a Peanuts history book? So I said, sure. And actually, those three books all came out within a month of each other.
Yeah, I remember that. They were all kind of at the same time. It's like, wow, how'd that happen? Because I thought you were just working on the 80s cartoons one, and I helped you a little bit on that one. And then the other two came out. It's like, where'd you have time to do all this? But I know how that is as an author myself, so yes.
I still don't know. So between, from Halloween to Thanksgiving, I had 3 books come out last year. And, and it's if you look at Hollywood, actors will seemingly not be working at all, and then all of a sudden you'll say, hey, Jude Law is in 5 movies this summer. How did he do that? And it's you do a little bit here, a little bit there, something hits a delay, studio or the publisher. Yeah, and in this case, it's the publisher saying, well, we want this to be ready for this holiday season, and if we're going to miss this mark, we're going to push it back to here, and we have to shuffle this, and we have to do that, and there's some bookkeeping involved, and contract negotiations, and when you're doing books with licensed properties, that's a whole other thing. So it looked like, if these had been spaced out, I probably would have had a book every other year, and it would not have looked like any big deal.
Right.
And right now, I'm wrapping up work on a Voltron book, and while I'm working on that, that's had a nice leisurely publishing schedule. And right now, I'm starting on another book, and these two will probably end up coming out the same day or the same week or something, just to just to do that all over again. It's probably going to look like, why do you keep taking 2 years off and then writing these books both?
Yeah. not realizing that they take about 2 years apiece to do. Yeah.
And some come together quickly. Peanuts I wrote very quickly. I like to point out that I'd already done 40-something years of research before writing that book.
Yeah.
And that's a different type of book. So something like 1980s animation. I interview as many people as I can. So I track down animators and voice actors and artists and scriptwriters and producers, toy manufacturers, this whole range of people, to do as much research as possible on that firsthand. But when I'm doing something like a book on Looney Tunes, and that's especially true now, but 10 years ago, very few of the people who had firsthand experience on the cartoons were still with us.
Right.
And again, with the approach the publisher wanted to take, I did not need to do that legwork. And also, as I said, people, like Jerry Beck and Leonard Maltin and John Canemaker, like all these Michael Barrier, all these great writers had done their research when these people were still around and available. So yeah, project by project, each book is a different set of challenges, and that matches up pretty neatly with my work at the museum, where I may be doing a Western artist from the early 1900s one week, and I might be CGI animation studio the next.
I just wanted to, as an aside on that Peanuts book, a recent podcast, I interviewed Nat Gertler, and he mentioned you, so I'll tell you what happened. He said you had a panel discussion, I believe he said San Diego, about Peanuts, and I think the question was posed, what's your favorite obscure Peanuts character or something to that effect, and he mentioned a character that I'm not sure if you have in the book or not, named Dolores. Does that ring a bell? And it was some obscure Peanuts character that only appeared in like a film strip series. It wasn't even in the actual strip. Anyway.
Yeah, that was actually, so my book, actually, we made the decision at the outset, this is going to be 100% just the comic strip characters.
Okay, so there's no
so if
Heather is the little red-haired girl.
Yeah. if Schultz didn't have a hand in it, if this character was not mentioned or referenced directly in the strip, I didn't talk about the character. I may have mentioned. Well, actually, I'd have to look up the entry on Snoopy's siblings. So yeah, Snoopy was part of a litter of 8 puppies, and so that's established, including like several places he mentions that there are 8 of them, and then they send his dad a Father's Day card, and they all signed it, and there are 8 paw prints. And what was interesting about that was we don't meet all 8 in the strip. So we meet Snoopy, of course, his brother Spike, his other brothers Andy and Olaf, his sister Belle, his brother Marbles. But there are two that we don't meet at all. And they're introduced in one of the Peanuts animated specials, and they're given names there.
I see.
But because they didn't show up in the strip, because we didn't get their names there, they weren't in the book.
Right.
So the I don't think I've done a signing without one of the animation fans coming up and asking, "What about this
Yeah.
character? And how dare you leave out?" And I have to point out, well, that's animation.
Bill Melendez. On that particular book, I've read the entire Peanuts comic strip series now since Fantagraphics put those out, but I wasn't doing it for research purposes, so I didn't really pay attention to if there was any inconsistencies. Did you find any really glaring inconsistencies on characters over the years that just kind of made things maddening to try to figure out?
For a strip that ran for 50 years, there's surprisingly few glitches. I'm thinking of the TV shows Cheers and Frasier.
Yeah.
Where they have when they created this character Frasier as a background character in Cheers, and then built him up into a regular, and they had his whole backstory on that show. They had no idea that he would be spun off into his own show with his own supporting cast, and that there would be these little continuity errors and contradictions that come about from having a character with that degree of longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they weren't a throwaway line in 1989. You don't realize that's going to have an impact on this TV series that you're going to be developing 7 years later,
right?
Or however long. Sorry, I don't have the IMDb open in front of me to check all the math on what. But anyway, a strip like Peanuts, obviously Schultz doing a joke in 1952. He was not thinking ahead to. I better be careful because in 1978 I may want to say something different about this character.
Yeah.
I would say that the biggest kind of glitches that I found, I don't think of them so much as errors. It's just this is just really interesting is the way the characters aged over the years.
Yeah.
So Charlie Brown, introduced as a kid, 1950, and he's introduced at pretty much the age he would remain for the entire strip. They got just a little bit older. I think he may have been that nebulous preschool right around kindergarten age when the strip started, but then kind of settled into this maybe second grade, maybe third grade aged kid by the end of for the majority of the strip. And there were characters that were introduced who were introduced as babies,
right?
Who grew up. So Charlie Brown's clearly a few years, like minimum 4 years older than these characters. So he met Schroeder as a baby. He met Linus as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And these characters caught up to him and basically, eventually became classmates.
Right.
With him.
Oh.
And you could get hung up on that. You could get. I'm obviously hung up on it to the point that I'm mentioning it.
Yeah.
But and Lucy was clearly younger than Charlie Brown at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, she carries herself as not as someone older than Charlie Brown, at least. Maybe she's even only a week older than Charlie Brown, but she certainly carries herself like a mature kid, like a big kid.
Right.
And her younger brother, the existence of her younger brother ages her a little bit. and the existence of a still younger brother rerun
Right.
ages them, and it's, I could talk for hours about the fact that, I think we've occasionally seen Linus and Charlie Brown in the same classroom.
Yeah.
Which Schultz would do just for the, this will be a good joke, this will be a good chance to have these two interact.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like that made Lucy just that little bit older, and that Linus, who was a baby, caught up to Charlie Brown eventually. I don't want to think about him being held back in school or anything.
Right.
But, I'd say Sally was a character who was introduced as a baby, and she got to grow a little bit older without, she went from being probably 4 years younger than Charlie Brown to maybe about 2 years younger. And I'm sure as I say this, someone is checking the handwritten chart that he has scrawled all over his wall.
Right.
Figuring out the relative ages and all this of the Peanuts characters.
Well, I always figured Charlie Brown himself aged about a year every 10 years, roughly, during the course of the 50-year strip. Because it seemed like he was about age 4 when it started, about 9 by the end. That's just kind of my rough take on it.
He's got good genes, I would say.
Yeah. Now the other ones grew faster. Yes. I guess the biggest transition is probably, and this would probably cause me confusion, is Woodstock, because Snoopy was around. Well, Snoopy was like a normal dog anyway, but the birds were drawn very realistic, and then eventually they became more cartoony, and then looking like Woodstock without names, and then there was Woodstock. Was there a real continuity problem on that character, or no?
Again, yeah. If you talk to Nat Gertler, he made sure to send me a note, and he said, like, are you going to address? And again, for people listening at home, he's one of your, absolute most knowledgeable Peanuts fans that you're going to find. He's written books.
Yeah.
Has put a lot of thought into a lot of work on this property over the years. And I think when he heard that I was working on this book, I think he almost immediately sent me a note like, so which date are you using for Woodstock's first appearance? Because there's the official date that the creative associates in the Charles Schultz studio uses, but he said there's this other character that's pretty clearly at least a proto Woodstock that shows up here, and just because this particular character isn't named until this point, obviously he was named after the music festival,
right?
So he would not have been around by name before that point. Yeah, so it's a fun, complicated thing.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you said you're busy. In fact, we had to interrupt this, but I'm cutting that part out. Any final words of any projects you're working on, or anything you want to plug? Anything about the Cartoon Art Museum you want to plug, or just in general? Talk about your wife, Shannon.
Yeah.
You can mention her by name at least.
Yeah, I'll rattle off the websites.
Okay.
Keep up on what I'm doing, andrewfarago.com, and that's where I list, my personal projects, so any books, convention appearances. If you want to buy signed books from me, that's the place to go. My wife, the lovely and talented Shannon K. Garrity, is a wonderful cartoonist and writer and editor. Shannon.com, SHAENON.com. But yeah, the best place to keep up with me is through the Cartoon Art Museum's website, cartoonart.org. And yeah, we've always got a full roster of events. I've got to actually go set up one right now. And yeah, just everybody keep reading and writing and producing comics, and we'll keep putting them out there.
And if somebody wanted to make a contribution or visit the Cartoon Art Museum address?
Yeah, cartoonart.org. You can go to visit us in San Francisco. We are at 781 Beach Street, just a half block from Ghirardelli Square.
All right, very good. All right, well, I want to thank you today for being my guest, Andrew, and very good talking to you. And
same here.
I wish you continued success with the museum and your books. And Shane and
okay, thanks a lot.
And Shane and and your kid. And your son.
All right, great.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you for listening, and thank you again for being my special guest, Andrew Farago. Episode number 25 will be coming soon. If you'd like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions, and if everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.